Welcome back. Angie Homley-Zabo here to teach you how to scumble today. Scumbling is the last of the 4 mark making techniques that I'm going to show you how to do. It's kind of the catch-all of mark making. You pick a mark, any mark, so a movement of your hand, and you repeat that mark over and over and over again, layering and layering and layering to build your value. It's kind of fun because you can do whatever. It's a little bit faster than hatching and cross hatching because it's not as technical as those two. And it's faster than stippling because you can layer more quickly. It's really a nice technique to build over time. You just have to remember when you're scumbling to build those layers just like you would with any other mark making technique. So lots of lovely light layers to build into your darks, and when you're drawing light, you're using your lighter pencils and you're still building those layers. I hope you enjoy scumbling.
Scumbling is a pretty fun mark to use. Really, it's any mark you want to make, and it's the last mark that we learn about because it transitions really well into the next topic that we cover in my Intro to Drawing class, which is texture. You pick a mark that matches the texture or the feel that you want for your piece. So far we've used hatching, cross hatching, and stippling, and if you haven't watched those videos, please go back and do so. And each of them is very technical, very specific mark. Scumbling can be anything, so it's a little bit freeing. So on my side of my paper here, I've drawn a variety of different marks: a star, my name, my first name, a scribble, a square, X's, dashes, and the number 8. And what you do with scumbling is you just kind of make that mark over and over and over again. In the end, it's not about seeing the star or seeing the number 8. It's about layering up those marks and using those layered marks to build value. And by layering different marks, we're going to build different textures and different appearances. So I'm doing the star, and I'm getting lighter as I move across. I'm using a 2B so that you can see it well on the screen, but to practice I would use maybe a HB. And as I move across, I get lighter and lighter, and then I layer more to get dark. What's interesting to me is when my students start scumbling, all of a sudden they stop layering to make their values. You really got to keep building up those layers. So there's my star. Now I'll do my name. And the scribble. And the square. And an X. And the dash. One thing you should be noticing as I'm doing all of these is I'm keep moving my marks around randomly. Just like students tend to have this desire to want to line up their stipples, they do the same thing with scumbling. They want to line up their scumbles. And you really want to randomize it, so keep things moving around. And if you look at the examples I've done so far, in the end, you don't really see that this says Angie or this is made of a star or that these are squares. What you see is a texture and a value that's left behind by layering those marks on your surface. And the number 8. Keep it random. So you can see all these different marks, making value scales by randomizing the mark, layering it up, and building it over time. Now, when we're using this in an actual art piece, we'd be using our different pencils for the lighter and darker values. You can see I don't have a full range of value in my value scales. But what I want you to do right now is to practice scumbling. pick a mark, and you can use the same marks I've used, but I'd like you to try some of your own. Come up with your own mark you're going to make that you can repeat over time, and build value with it. Build it up slow, light to dark, and lots of layers. We're going to start our scumbled square the same way that we start all of our mark making. We start by building in the form shadow in a medium tone, and then building into the darkest values in the core shadows, and then building back out into light and mid-tones. It's the same way that you would handle drawing any object. You'd look at the object, define the shape, and then figure out where those form shadows are, build them in, then push the core shadows dark, then work into your highlights. So I'm going to start with my HB, and I am going to do just a figure 8 scumble. And it's really important when you scumble, keep things moving around. Don't try to go in lines. I find it difficult sometimes to avoid that, especially when I'm doing something like a number or a letter. It's kind of natural to want to go in a linear direction with it. But you want to keep it a little bit random. And I'm just going to build up some loose layers in the form shadow. With a scumble, be careful not to get too big with your mark. The nice thing about a scumble is it's this nice loose mark. You don't have to be precise, so it often goes quite a bit faster than other mark making where you have to be quite precise. But the challenge in that is sometimes when you're going faster, students will start to make really big marks that don't work very well. I've built in my form shadow nicely, I'm going to go in with my 2B and start to build in my core shadow. And again, when you're drawing, it's a layering process. You don't want to get too dark too fast. Build into those darker layers. Be careful with your scumble not to get bigger as you move forward. Keep that scumble small, fairly tight, and of course, all things in art and drawing, there's no hard and fast rules. So would there be a time and a place for a big scumble? For sure. But now is not that time and the place. Right now we want to try to work on building up some really nice, beautiful, soft values and learn how to do things more technically correct. And then once we figure that out and master it, then we go in and break all the rules and have some fun while we're doing it. Now my 4B. And our 6B, and we're just continuing to build into that core shadow. So every time I pick up a new pencil that's darker, I get tighter and tighter and closer into that core shadow. I spread my marks out less far. I build them up, and I'm careful not to push because graphite, when you push, gets a real silvery tone. So if you can see your paper starting to like wrinkle or roll, you're pushing too hard, you're burnishing, and you really want to avoid burnishing with a graphite pencil. You don't want to push that paper flat. You don't want to bring up that silver tone of the graphite because graphite is a metal. And if you push too hard, you see that metallic nature, and we want to try to keep it looking in gray and black zones. So we don't push hard. We find the right pencil for the darkness that we need, and instead of pushing hard to build dark, we build layers to build into the darks. And my 8B. Now I'm going to go back to my 4B, and I'm going to start working out my midtones from that core shadow. So blending into so I've got really dark through here. I want to blend out through mark making into some mid-tone grays and then eventually lighter grays. And I'll work my way from 4B to 2B to HB to 2H to 4H. working into those light zones eventually. I'm jumping to my HB. For my midtones, I skip the 2B because I don't think I need to use it. You don't always need to use every level of pencil. A big part of art is observing what you have, noticing what works and is working and keeping it, what isn't working and getting rid of it, and problem solving what the next best thing to do is. So what am I going to do next? What does this piece need? How am I going to go about doing that? So it's not a thoughtless process. There's a ton of thought that goes into a drawing. It's just kind of low-key thoughts. You don't even realize you're having them half the time. But when you're learning, you got to kind of pay attention to them. When I work with my lightest pencils, so right now I'm using my 2H, I'm barely pushing on the page. I want my marks to be really subtle, and I want to be able to build up lots of very subtle marks, so I have to have very low pressure. That's hard for a lot of people. If you're a heavy-handed writer, getting light values for you is probably going to be a challenge. It's something you're going to have to work on. So when I'm holding my pencil, it's super loose when I'm working with my 4H and my 2H. Because if I'm holding on tight, I'm going to push hard, and I won't be able to get really nice light marks and build in those beautiful light values and tones. Because you don't want to jump right from a middle gray to a white. Usually there's some transition, and you want to make sure that transition has some build to it in those mark making. Now I'm going in and I'm just kind of looking at my sphere and figuring out, where do I need more value? Where do I need less value? Where do I need to build up more marks? And just kind of perfecting or attempting to perfect as close as I can my sphere. And just remember, none of this is going to be perfect. We're all just learning. We're seeing how this goes. We're human. So just do the best work that you can do. At this point, I like how my sphere looks, so I would build in my core shadow and any background work that I want to do. Remember with scumbling that you want to keep your mark small and consistent. You want to move around randomly so you don't create lines, and you really want to build your layers to get dark and build your light layers too. Just do so softly. I'm going to build in the rest of my drawing now.